10 o'clock. We have quorum. We'll call the Electoral Area Service Committee meeting of February the 5th, 2025 to order. Chair acknowledges that we're located on the traditional territory of the Letchworth people, and the first item of business will be the adoption of public agenda.
Move adoption.
Chair, if I may, I request an item of new business. So may I move to amend the
All
public
right, do
agenda?
you want to just tell me the title?
Area C OCP.
All righty, thank you. We need a seconder for adoption of the
Second.
agenda.
Second.
As amended.
Second.
Thank you. Dr. Rice. All those in favor? That is carried. Adoption of previous meeting minutes.
Move adoption, or move previous meeting minutes.
Second.
This is for January 8, 2025, Electoral Area Service Committee. All those in favor? That's carried. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none. No public considerations, no notice of the motion, no chair report. On K, staff reports, Quad Island sitting application for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion, anyone?
I believe Meredith will speak to this.
Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. An application was received to permit a placement of an accessory structure on real property at 2132 Hyacinth Bay Road in Quadra Island. Before this application or any land use application can proceed, we require authorization from all of the owners on title. In this case, this property is owned by a joint user agreement, so multiple owners on one title. And they have taken a vote to enable a simple majority of to represent their joint ownership to serve as the authorization for the application to proceed. But as it doesn't include all of the owners on title, we do need permission from the board to proceed. Thank you.
Director Mooney?
Thank you to staff for bringing this forward. I have been receiving some communication from the applicant, and he is definitely keen to have his siting permit move forward. I think in this instance, we have a situation which we see less frequently. A joint ownership, doesn't really fit the mold and the bylaw that we have in place, but I'm interested in moving the recommended motion.
Anything further? On receipt then, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Item B, correspondence from Thomas Gibson regarding Quad Island sitting application for receipt.
I'll move the receipt of the correspondence.
Second.
Thank you. Anything there? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Item C, please. Robin?
I would move that the committee recommend that the board authorize staff to proceed with citing application QS15C24 on the basis of the correspondence received from the manager of the Open Bay Group of Tenants in Common.
Second.
Thank you, Director Vanesh. Anything further? All those in favor? It's carried. Item number 2, development cost charges, Electoral Area D.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion? Director Rice?
I was actually hoping that staff would talk on this. Thank you.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Good morning to the chair and directors. I'm presenting the report titled Development Cost Charges in Electoral Area D. The report is in response to the November 6, 2024 resolution that staff outlined 3 items. Number 1, the current charges for services. Number 2, additional budget associated with establishment of a DCC bylaw for Area D. And 3, the potential impacts to developers. To touch on the background to this report, there's been discussion previously about DCCs, and they are imposed to address costs of expansion of existing SRD services and infrastructure related to new development. DCCs are applied at the time of subdivision and building permit approval, and in Area D, DCCs would apply to water, parks, and street lighting. So first, the current charges for water, parks, and street lighting include a connection fee for water, which is fixed at $2,500, and the associated application fee of $200. Park dedication or cash in lieu at the time of subdivision is required if there are more than 3 parcels and under 2 hectares. Street lighting is more limited in Area D and is typically proposed as part of development, and costs of installation are borne by the landowner. Second, in relation to the budget associated with establishment of a DCC bylaw in Area D, there would be anticipated costs for research and development of a new bylaw and costs for engaging a consultant to complete a study, which could range between $20,000 and $30,000. And lastly, if a DCC bylaw were to be imposed in Area D, it would result in additional costs to developers that accurately represent the cost to the SRD for expansion of services and infrastructure. The report provides a comparison of DCCs imposed in the CVRD for reference. And this was done under separate bylaws in the CVRD, and collection rates are shown in tables 1 and 2 within the report. To impose a bylaw, just to recap, it must be approved by the Inspector of Municipalities in accordance with the Local Government Act. Thanks.
Just a quick question if I can. Fire protection wasn't on there. Could we not impose fire protection in Area D as well, DCC?
There's a possibility to, within the study, determine whether or not that is possible because of the way that it's paid for in the SRD. It just requires additional study into how that cost can be recouped while paying it to the service that's provided.
Sorry, thank you, Kelty. Just to expand on that, the SRD would need to own and control the asset for it to qualify for DCC charges. So yes, it is a provision of the Local Government Act that would extend to fire protection services if the SRD owned and controlled the asset.
Anything further, anyone? Dr. Rice?
Just one question. With regards to the cost, would that come out of Area D's feasibility studies, or where does it come from?
Thank you, through the chair. We would have to do a little bit of research to determine whether or not that would meet the requirements of a feasibility study. I don't know if Tom has anything that he can add at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe it could be funded out of the feasibility study reserve fund. It is part of the Part 14 of the Act, so I would think it would be part of the planning budget for looking into that.
And thank you, through the chair, depending on which service you're referring to, it may also include costs borne by the engineering department.
Okay. Just a follow-up question. Area D has its own feasibility fund?
Correct, but it can only be used for looking at the establishment of new services. That is specifically set by statute, so
Okay.
it would have to be, in my mind anyways, it would have to fall under the existing service of land use management or land use planning.
Okay. All right, thank you.
On receipt, all those in favor? That is carried. Anything further? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move option A, that the committee recommend that the regional district proceed with the development of a development cost charge bylaw for electoral area D.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Dr. Mooney?
Thank you. And I had a similar question to the question that Director Rice asked, and it was if that $20,000 to $30,000 would be funded through a feasibility fund. So just to confirm, what I'm hearing is it would come from the electoral area planning fund. Is that correct?
Maybe, I'm going to say, because let's say it's a DCC, because we'll bring a number of options to the committee for which DCCs, because there's parks, there's water, there's drainage. So we'll examine where that could come from. So if it's, let's say, a parks DCC that's desired, it could come from the parks function, which wouldn't be the planning function. But let us have a look at that, and then we'll bring those options forward.
And just one more quick question was that am I correct in my reading of this report that for every DCC, which affects a different service, then it would have to be an amendment to each different service bylaw? It's not one development cost charge bylaw, it's actually editing the service bylaws that are already existing? No, okay.
Thank you through the chair. It's our understanding, depending on which services are to be explored for a DCC charge, that typically a new establishment bylaw for each of those services would be created. So if there was, if in, say, Area C was contemplating a DCC bylaw for sewer, say, then we would create an establishment bylaw for DCCs for sewer for Area C. Similarly to Area D, we could investigate whether or not if there were multiple DCC charges for Area D, we could do that under one bylaw, or we could separate them. My understanding is that the CVRD has done those through separate bylaws, but it would need a new establishment bylaw for each of those services, whether or not they could be combined for Area D, but certainly for Area C, you would explore your own establishment bylaw.
Okay, on the motion, all those in favor? And that is carried. Number 3, Northern Area D water metered rate suspension for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
And Sheena will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. To the directors. So this is the ongoing progression of the universal water metering in Area D. Currently under our rates and regulations bylaw, there is a rate set for metered clients. Currently the water meters in our system are Neptune meters, which have a different meter reading software and apparatus than are the new meters that we've gone with for the project being Camstrup. Further to that, any new meters being installed through development, which is a requirement of the bylaw, are now also going to be Camstrup meters to achieve greater homogeny amongst the service. So per our contract with Edgit, they will not be onboarding the necessary software and meter reading equipment to actually read the water meters until near the end of the project. Some folks will be receiving water meters in the coming weeks, and some will be receiving them towards the end, which we're anticipating is the fourth quarter of this year. So some people will be getting meters in, and per the current bylaw would automatically roll into the metered rate charge. But since we're unable to read those meters, we are proposing a suspension of the application of metered rates to all folks receiving Camstrup meters. So everybody who are currently on the Neptune meters will still continue reading those and billing per the current bylaw, but folks receiving the new Camstrup meters will need to wait until we have the equipment and IT infrastructure in place to actually bill those properties. I'm happy to answer any other questions that the committee might have. Thank you.
Any questions, Director? Mr. Rice?
Thank you, Chair. The one question that I had on this is that, okay, I understand, the issue here. Once the software is up and running, will there be a reconciliation billing for folks?
If I may, that's going to be tricky. So there's going to be a few things that meters do is one, people are going to alter their consumption, and two, we're going to find a ton of leaks. So what we're going to have to do is find out how much water, at the end of the day, we need to collect enough revenue to pay the bulk water costs in the operations. So we're going to use the data we have to kind of figure out consumption numbers and rates. So we're not going to be able to go back and say, okay, we didn't read your meter, but now that everyone's in, we're going to go back and give you what that rate would have been. Because I'm not going to promise you the rates are going to be the same. We're going to have to look at consumption and make sure that consumption jives with the revenue that we're going to need for the bulk purchase. So the folks, along and the short of it, is the folks that are getting meters today and until the end will continue to pay the bulk water rate. And then once we have that, we'll look at the consumption numbers, figure out what those rates are going to be, likely amend the bylaw, and then everyone will be on the metered rate.
Okay, I'm still a little bit confused. Follow-up, Chair?
Sure.
Once the meter is in, the meter is already working, so it's already tallying how much water is being used. Are you telling me that the software, whenever it's installed, can't pick up that data?
No, but what you're going to have is, let's say there's 800 to do and they can do 5 a day. So they put 5 in, and the next day another 5. Everyone's on a different window of time. So then when it's time to read everyone's meter, everyone's got a different start date in there, first of all. So like you've got, let's say you're halfway through, you've got half of it metered, half of it unmetered. How do you consolidate that bill, and how do you make it equitable for everyone? The easiest thing to do is stay on. Plus, the other thing is consumption. We're going to have to know community consumption, not individual consumption, because we buy this bulk water that everybody shares, and we got to make sure what everyone shares the revenue from that is enough to pay those costs.
I'm still not following this conversation, so is there a rush to make a decision today?
Not, I don't think specifically today, but what we're saying is we want to get ahead of the person that has the meter and new meter installed today, to lower the expectation that they're going to pay the metered rate. Because as you can appreciate, literally every day from now for 6-8 months from now, there's going to be meters installed.
Yes.
So every day, and then we read meters at a certain point of time and send out bills. So if you can appreciate, just making up some numbers, 300 people in this window of time had meters installed, but they had them installed at different dates.
I get all that. What I don't get is the meter is already, once the meter's in, the meter's already keeping track of the water that's being used.
Individually.
Individually. What I don't understand is when you go to read the meter, why isn't it able to know that the meter started at 0, it's now 300, so there's the amount.
You can, but here's the thing. So you read it on a date that, let's say they had it read, they had it installed halfway through the program. So you've got half a period of a bulk water rate and half of it a metered rate, because they didn't get it installed on the first day, right? So how do you consolidate a half a meter's rate and a half a bulk water's rate for starters? And every person is on literally a different date than that.
I get that, but I thought when homeowners put in water meters on their own dime, the way that it worked out is that the day that that meter was installed, they went back and took a look, and they were able to prorate the flat rate to that time. And then moving forward, we were on a meter rate. So what I'm hearing is not quite the same thing.
Well, first of all, the volume of people that did that, it was quite a bit easier when you've got 1,000 homes on there and one person or two people put in a meter, or 10 of them. It's not going to have that much impact globally on the community. But let's say you take 800 homes, and in a 6-8 month window, they all are hooking up on a different date. And so every one of them is going to have some adjusted window of metered and non-metered rate. And then at the same time, we need to make sure we collect enough revenue to pay the
I
full.
understand that, but it would have been nice to have this communication last year when the project was approved, because there is a very high level of expectation from folks that their billing is going to go down. And now what you're saying is it's not going to go down until the project is completed.
Yeah, I suppose that we could have communicated that better, but practicality, if everyone had the meter installed on the same date, which isn't practical, I think knowing that it's going to take several months, and again, every day you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and then over that period, you're going to have 800 people starting at a different date with different consumptions, and every one of them is going to need a combination of that. And then at the same time, you got to figure out how that's going to consolidate with the bulk water and how much revenue we need to do to pay that.
Right.
That would just be, I think, next to impossible. So they're going to, once everyone's on the metered rate, will convert. But you have, again, two things that are out of your control. One is how much water people are individually going to use. They're going to start using less for sure. Statistics say that. And two, how much water we were losing to leaks. So how we project how much we're going to collect is going to be true. You can't collect too little. So we need to have a good idea about when we get these meters in, how much water we're using, how much we're paying for it, and then how that consolidates with all those folks.
Can I ask a question, sir? Does the meter record or can it record average daily consumption individually?
I think what generally happens is you take read A minus B and you divide that.
Because I'm thinking that if for the first round, everybody was billed on average daily consumption individually, it wouldn't matter how long the meter was in.
Yeah, well, it's kind of what we do with the bulk. I mean, it doesn't matter how much you use right now. It's based on a community average. So that will continue in essence.
But it could be individual average.
If I may, the meters, because we went with the radio read technology, they are not actually transmitting data that frequently. They only transmit the data when we drive by. So we won't be seeing those high and low daily flows per individual home. We'll just be getting a snapshot in time when we read the meters. They do have the capability to do more if we have introduced additional technology, but with what we currently have spec'd, we're not going to be able to capture that information.
But if you divided that by the number of days they had the meter, should have their average daily usage, and they just bill them for the whole time frame on that.
The tricky thing is, again, we have a different combination of people having meters for a certain amount of time, and then people not having meters. And you have to consolidate that to figure out, you got to generate the revenue to pay that. Well, without knowing what that is, I've seen it happen in the past, you can short yourself quite easily. So we need to have as much. So what are we going to do? Lean on all the people that didn't have meters? They're going to get a hefty bill. So let's say we do it this way. We start individually, as we hook people up on meters, we charge them a metered rate. Well, the people that get it near the end, we're going to have to take the remainder, divide it by them, and collect what we need from them, which is going to be more. They're going to be the ones, wearing the unfair end of that stick. Like that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you start metering and you start reading these people and they start conserving, right? Great. And you can only get to so many a day. So these people at the end, we get to a billing period and we go, okay, well, we've charged these people all these metered rates. We need to collect this much revenue and you folks are the only ones left. So you're all on a bulk rate and we'll average that. Well, that's going to be pretty unfair to those folks. What we do right now is we can take the whole thing and consumption net is going to drop. And so the average to everyone should be less. Yeah. So that's the most fair way. Practically, you can't flick a switch as you connect people up. It's just not equitable.
Okay. Director Vinesh.
Thank you, Chair. I can appreciate folks in the area thinking that once they put the meter in that they're going to be metered and that's what they're going to pay for. So I'm wondering if the director from this area would be interested in amending the motion to include just an update on communicating to residents on the situation, given what you think their expectations might be.
I have no issues with that.
Okay, we're still on receipt. Dr. Winnie.
Thank you, Chair. And this is quite an interesting conversation. The question that I had to this report was that I recalled in November at our board meeting, our staff identified that there were about 200 homes where the connection had not yet been located, and they were being considered for phase 2 of the project, which was going to be tendered in summer 2025, if my memory serves. So this motion kind of seems to tie these as yet undiscovered 200 connections to the metering service actually beginning. And so I'm wondering if that is intentional, if if there's going to be these, could the 200 undiscovered connections essentially stall the rollout of metering?
Well, I'm going to answer that, Mr. Chair. If this isn't a linear process, is that you inherit I don't know, 1,200 connections. And so equitably, we went out and we got money from the province, 2.6 million or something like that, to help offset the cost of it. Then to be more equitable, we went out and, because if a contractor is uncertain of what he has in front of him, the price is going to go up. So we went out and we did a locate on all the ones that we could find, tendered them as a package so the contractor knew exactly where they are, gave us as low a price as possible. So what we're left with now is about 200 homes that nobody knows where are. We're sending letters out to the homeowners and say, do you have any idea what it is? To try and make this as equitable for everyone as we can. And that's just how it rolls out. So at the end of the day, we have these 200 homes that we're trying to find a way to get meters on them. And we will have to come up with something creative, whether we want to stall the overall for that or come up with an average rate for them. The good news is there will be less people on a bulk rate, so we're going to be better equipped to identify how much that rate would be. And there's more people on metered rates, therefore the overall consumption is going to be down. So net, it's going to be lower, but it's just the nature of what's out there. To get things done, get them metered, get the best prices out there. We've left with these 200, and we'll have to try and come up with something creative or suitable for the whole community without stalling the entire program till we get this last meter in. But everyone's a net benefit. As meters go in, consumption goes down, and we buy less, and therefore everyone's going to pay less.
If I may have a follow-up, Chair, thank you. And I guess my concern is that this motion says that, that we recommend that we suspend metered rate until the universal water meter project is completed. And so I'm wondering if there's a recommendation or consideration from staff that we could amend this motion so that those 200 still undiscovered connections don't hold up the metering rate for the other folks.
Well, if you make that motion, I'm not certain that we can do that. We're going to have to bring options back and say, okay, we're sending out this information. This is the kind of timeline we think we have on the remaining 200 meters. What would you like us to do then? And bring you options then about a metered rate for the other 800, 900,000 homes, or do you want to do some hybrid? But I don't know. So if you make it and say don't suspend it, or suspend it until the 200 are started, I can't guarantee that's going to work. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
Mr. Rice?
I thought that when this contract was awarded last year, that it was very clear in the terms of the contract that we have phase one, which is the 852 water meters going in, that it completes that part of the contract. The other 200 connections was only referred to as phase two. It wasn't even priced into this contract right now. So why would we hold up? Once the contractor's finished phase one, why would we hold up switching over to a metered rate?
And we may not, but we'll be better. We're trying to identify and get a cost for those other 200. Like this installation right now is going to take 6 months. So we suspend the rates. We'll have information back to you in probably a month or two on the other 200. And then we'll give you options. And you can say, okay, once you're done these 800, flip it to a metered rate, and we'll say what we're going to have to do for these 200 homes. We'll have a better idea on consumption too and what that's going to impact. But what we don't want is a bunch of winners and losers out there, because the losers, it won't be because of anything they've individually done. It's like, okay, we're this far in the queue, and maybe the leaks are on the first half, maybe on the second half, right? So it would be really unfair to them. It's likely that we'll bring something back and say, at the conclusion of the installation of these 800, we're going to flip to metered rates, and this is what we're going to do for the other 200. And because we have a better idea on what consumption numbers and what we'll need to collect from them, because we don't want them to unfairly pay rates because nobody can find their meter.
Okay, I understand that, but that's not what this motion is saying.
To me, this motion says that we're going to suspend the meter rates. So the 850, we're not going to read a bill on meter reads on the 850 until we're finished the 850th home. So lowering the expectations of that person that had that meter put in yesterday is going to get a metered rate. They're not going to get a metered rate until the final one of the 850 is done. Because
May I just add a few points? So a couple other things to consider is part of our grant application does require a review of the bylaw and the metered rates. So we will have to undertake that process anyway to meet those obligations. And as the CAO alluded to, where there's a likelihood that those rates will change from what the current bylaw is. And additionally, we haven't brought it forward yet because we're still scoping it out, but we are working with the existing contractor to try to install as many meters of those unfound meters as possible under the current contract unit prices, because there's a lot of efficiencies for them doing it while they're already in the area and they've already got the materials and the equipment, so they're not doing remobilization. And then we've already got those prices locked in for the meters and the accessories. So we're just trying to put sort of a box around that to come to you with some pricing, but we're hoping to increase the number of meters going in from that 850 to under the current contract, but it will require a contract amendment. So we'll bring that forward to you once we've got a little bit more details baked into it.
Okay, on receipt, Director Nash?
I'm wondering, just adjusting this motion to meet everybody here, if we said until phase one of the universal meter project is completed, if that would work for the CAO? Does that seem appropriate? Yeah, okay. And then adding on to the end of that, and that we communicate with folks so they know what expectations are, if Director Rice is happy with that.
I am, thank you.
Okay, I'm happy to make that motion when we get to it.
So not to belabor, just to be clear, we could bill people as they get their meters. Trust me, the people that are unbilled are going to weigh the bulk of the weight of the bills, right? Because what you're going to do is these people that are metered, their consumption is definitely going to go down. If there was a leak there, it's going to be identified. And then the rest of everyone's left with the leaks and the overages and everyone and spreading that wealth. That's going to be unfair to those folks just because where they are in the queue. So I think you're going to get a lot more complaints from the people if you read them along and made those adjustments, and from the people that didn't. Because, there's a line. Somebody's going to be at the end of it. And those that are near to the end are going to have this bulk water rate absorb them on that. And that's going to be the amount of money we need to consolidate our bulk water purchase.
Yeah, I just take the average usage of all the meter people and attribute that usage to everybody else who isn't metered and set the price accordingly.
Yeah, we have to collect enough money.
Yeah, but that's what I mean by set the price accordingly, just collect enough.
Well, we basically do that in that we're, taking the consumption and dividing it equally amongst everyone that is now. So the issue will be that some people might have this expectation that I have my meter and I'm consuming less personally, I want a lower bill. And
Next month.
next billing period, yeah.
Okay, on receipt, all those in favor? And that is carried. Motion, Director Rice, do you have a motion to make, or is it Director Manesh going to make the motion?
I'm happy to do it if you want. Yeah, I'll move that the committee recommended that bylaw number 324 be amended to suspend the application of the metered rate for all CAMSTRUP meters until phase one of the universal meter project is completed, and that staff communicate to affected residents to make them aware of what their expectations
Okay,
will
that's
be.
not an amended motion, that's just the motion.
No, it's an amended motion. I added phase one.
Nobody made the first one.
I didn't make the first motion.
That's what I say, it's just a motion, you're making a motion.
I'm making a motion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
We need a seconder.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor? And that's carried. Number 4, emergency service public arts project selection process for receipt.
Move receipt.
I believe Mr. Koopman will speak to this.
Through the chair to the committee, under two different funding streams of the UBCM Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation Grant, we've obtained funding for public art projects. One of those projects is to paint 4 SRD-owned water tanks located on Cortez Island, 2 of them at the Manson's Fire Hall, 2 of them on Sutil Road, with murals that represent climate change adaptation, hope, and inspiration. The other project is a tsunami wave sculpture on Walters Island on a Modi right-of-way that we've obtained permission from the province to put it there. And that'll be accompanied by a community kiosk and notice board with tsunami safety notifications and the evacuation map. Not wanting to be the one to evaluate this myself and put this on staff. Art is very subjective. I think it's best that the community members who reside there decide what should be represented. So I'm proposing that we put out a call for 5 to 7 members of each area to help assist staff with the selection process of the murals and the artwork. Different communities, of course. Open to any questions?
Dr. Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm a great fan of public art. I think this is awesome. I have had some people being like, why are we spending all this money on this thing, art, when we need to spend it otherwise? So just, I think I already know the answer, but can you just clarify that this was a specific grant to do the art, and we're not taking funds away from anything else to do this project?
Yeah, correct. Public art projects to support emergency management disaster risk reduction was a specific category we could apply for under the disaster risk reduction grant.
Great, thank you. And just to follow up, this, basically the plan is we're going to put out people can apply, they'll submit their design proposal, and then the committee will make the decision, and we're looking for local people to do that.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
On receipt? All those in favor? It's carried. Motion?
I'll move that the committee recommend that the regional district approve the final selection of public art to be funded through the UBCM Disaster Risk Reduction / Climate Change Adaptation Grant Stream, and that steering committees representing Cortez Island and Walter Island be established to provide recommendations on the designs submitted for these projects.
Second.
Discussion? Dr. Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I just was a little bit, maybe, Sean, you could explain to me the part 1 of this recommended motion here, that we're recommending that the regional district approve the final selection of public art, but we haven't, what are we recommending to be approved? I don't really understand that. Whatever the steering committee decides, so we're kind of like pre-approving the whole process? Is that what's happening here?
Mr. Yates has a comment.
Well, Mr. Chairman, my understanding of the motion is that the board would actually make the final decision, but it would be asking for recommendations from these committees, from these steering committees in each case as to what they would recommend is the winner, if you will. That's my understanding. So
Okay.
maybe Sean can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
So staff would receive the designs. We would run this designs by the committee. The committee would select their approved designs. We would bring their opinion to the EASC and then to the board for final approval of the designs.
So the board needs to approve the final selection of public art before we create a steering committee? No.
No.
Okay.
Going to create a steering committee, going to give them the proposed designs. They're going to make a recommendation to the board, and the board will likely endorse the committee's recommendation.
Okay.
And sorry, one more question. If you could just know what the budgets are for both of these. And I assume the call for proposals would be like X amount of budget, give us your proposals.
Yeah. $4,500 per tank.
Thank you.
On the motion, all those in favor? That's carried. Number 5, proposed Cortez Island Wildfire Brigade for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Any discussion here?
Sean will speak to this.
Right. It's been several months since this first came to this table. The reason for that is staff have been undertaking extensive meetings with our legal counsel about this proposal, and we're trying to summarize that extensive legal conversation in the two-pager in front of you. The three themes of that are, one, our current contract with the fire department states that all members must meet the exterior operations level of the BC firefighter structure standards. The fire department, this auxiliary wildfire brigade, does not currently meet that level. So that's an issue with the contract. It's also an issue that if this wildfire brigade remains an independent service of just the CFA, that's an issue with the contract that legal counsel want us to bring forward. And then the last bit is also a reminder that as long as this fire service is continued to be provided through a contract, we cannot indemnify the volunteers, we cannot allow them access onto private property, and there's significant liability and work-safe concerns in the event of an accident, injury, or death. And then there's two options for the committee's consideration.
Dr. Vaness?
Okay, I appreciate that. Can you provide more details on what the changes in the contract will be? Will there be additional costs you expect? And then just to clarify, my understanding of this wildfire brigade, which I think is just great proactive movement from CFA, is that we're getting a bunch of volunteers that the original plan was that were slightly less trained, that could do things like dig ditches and do sort of basic manual labor that keeps them out of harm's way, but it's going to be useful in case of a wildfire brigade, and they're not going to be the front lines people with hoses and driving the fire trucks.
Yeah, through the chair to the director, if option A was selected, that is the type of language that we would amend in the contract, that the contract does recommend this lower but still very useful level of service.
Is there a role for our fire administrator in this? The one we just hired?
Yeah, they're working with the Cortez Island Fire Department.
Good.
As far as increase in costs, we're not expecting any, is that right?
The fire department has stated they don't expect an increase in costs for this wildfire brigade. It's already existed for over a year.
Yeah. Great, thanks. And just for folks listening online or watching this later on, this was sort of a Cortez-made idea to address the issue of increased risk from wildfires, and a way to get people involved in fire protection that didn't have to commit people to doing the weekly meetings and getting the full certification when they're fighting house fires, and allow for us to sort of better prepare for the risk of wildfires and have more people on board that can help in the simpler tasks. Thank you to staff, and yeah, I'm prepared to move option A.
Okay, on receipt then. Call the question. Or you have something there, Director Winnie?
Well, I did have one question. Reading the report, I noticed like the map that was provided doesn't really, I couldn't identify if there were Crown or public lands within the fire protection service area, because you did include a chart that said that that it's actually only voluntary to be, for the CFA to be providing wildfire services to Crown land within a fire protection area, and that actually BC Wildfire Service is the responsible party. But the map didn't identify, and I'm curious if you know if there are public lands within that fire protection area.
Through the director, or through the chair to director, yeah, there's Crown lands within the fire protection area, and that remains the direct response of BC Wildfire Service.
Okay, thank you.
On receipt then, all those in favor? That's carried. Anything further in this one, Director Vaness?
Just make the motion. I'll move that the committee recommend that the current contract be modified to include the wildfire brigade service level within the boundaries of the established fire protection boundaries.
Second.
Second, Director Winnie. Discussion? All those in favor? It's carried. Number 6, Active Transportation Network Plan, Electoral Area C for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Planning staff will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Thank you. Through the chair, we actually have our consultants online with us to present.
Nothing further? Oh, here we go.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen here, and we have a approximately 10-minute overview of the draft Active Transportation Network Plan. So bear with me here while I pull it up. Okay, do we all see a blue title slide? Excellent,
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. My name's Dan Casey. I'm a transportation planner with Urban Systems, and we've been brought on board to support the SRD on this Electoral Area C Active Transportation Network Plan. Our goal for this morning is to provide an overview of the draft ATNP, talk through some of the process that was involved in developing the plan, introduce the plan itself, and then speak to some of the implementation items and next steps. So the process that was undertaken generally followed 5 steps. We got going late summer of 2024 with launch of the project and background technical review. Through the fall, we completed phase 1 of community engagement. Those first 2 phases of work were really summarized in what we called a current state document. So that document, I believe, is part of the agenda package today alongside the staff report and has been on the project webpage over the last couple months. We moved to phase 3, which was to actually draft the Active Transportation Network Plan based on some of the key directions from that background work and first phase of community engagement. We were out in the community through January via a survey and an open house. And then lastly, this month and next, we're hoping to finalize the Active Transportation Network Plan, including confirming a top priority project that would be the focus for a grant application later in the year. So to dig in a little bit on the community engagement that's occurred, in October and November, we had an open house that was hosted at the community center. That was October 29th. We had about 35 community members in attendance. We had a survey that was open for a period of almost 4 weeks. We had approximately 150 responses to that survey. And then we had focused group meetings with Wee-Way-Kai First Nation, as well as with some key interest groups within the community. And so all of that information really helped provide the baseline understanding of current conditions, but also where community members and interest groups see opportunities to advance active transportation. More recently, we had a phase 2 of engagement that occurred through the month of January, including an open house that was actually hosted last week. We had a smaller number of attendees for the second open house, but the conversation was quite great. We also had a survey that was open for a period of approximately 3 weeks, and we received a good response rate of approximately 120 responses to that survey. A couple images here from the open house number 1 back in October. Image on the right is just showing community members, SRD staff, and consulting team members engaging around a series of maps. We also had a number of interactive activities that were available to attendees as well. So there's images of that on the left. Dot democracy exercise where we ask attendees to weigh in on where their priorities might lie, and some opportunities to gather around maps and really sort of point to some of the problematic locations within the community. Some of the key takeaways, and this is sort of general themes from what we heard between conversations, open house, and the survey. There's a concern over the lack of sidewalks, steep topography, and vehicle traffic, and that's really limiting people's willingness to engage in walking and cycling. We heard that road conditions and road safety concerns around high speeds, blind corners, narrow roads make people feel unsafe walking and cycling. We heard a desire for improved access and connections to some of the key destinations within the community. So that being the elementary school, and that being connections to and from ferry terminals at Cube Cove and Harriet Bay. And then lastly, we did hear a clear desire for expansion of active transportation infrastructure and facilities, but we also heard that the community would like to see infrastructure that really sort of contributes and respects the local character that's already been established. They like the community and want to make sure that infrastructure additions are sort of fitting with the character of the community. Okay, so the draft Active Transportation Network Plan, it's been on the project webpage for about a month, shared with the community, and it's in the alongside the staff report in the meeting agenda package here today. It's organized into 6 sections. The first is an overview of the documents, and then answering some of the key questions around what it is, how it's organized, and how it's intended to be used. Section 2 is what we've called shaping influences. These are sort of presenting the understanding of the community today and some of the established plan and policy directions that help guide the work that was done. Section 3 is a summary of active transportation today, so some of the travel characteristics and how people get around. Section 4 summarizes the community engagement that was undertaken as part of this plan process. Section 5 is really where the plan starts to take shape. We've called it future directions, and it includes sort of an overall plan framework, long-term network, and some supporting design guidelines. And then Section 6 is focused on plan implementation. And I'm actually going to sort of focus a lot of the rest of the content here on that. So the plan framework is part of that Section 5 that I'd introduced. It is quite high level, but it's important. And it does describe sort of the guidance and direction that led to the content of the plan. It's also intended as something that in future, as implementation of the plan occurs, it's sort of a checkpoint and a reference point to make sure that actions that are taken are in line with the overall framework for the plan. So it includes a vision statement. The vision statement's on the left side of the screen here. It reads as follows. Communities in Electoral Area C are supported by an accessible active transportation network that enables people of all ages and abilities to travel safely and comfortably throughout the area and beyond, while preserving the uniquely rural and low-density character enjoyed by residents and visitors. There's also a series of 5 goals, and so these goals are meant to describe both what the plan is set out to achieve, and then they're sort of a reference point in future to refer back to gauge the level of success and implementation of the plan. And these are what's on the screen in front of us. They're paraphrased from the more long-form goals that are in the plan. The goals revolve around more people walking and more people making walking and cycling trips, achieving an accessible and well-connected active transportation network, improving connections on and off Quadra Island, improving safety and comfort for people walking and cycling, and then 5th, securing infrastructure funding to support the build-out of an active transportation network. Also important in Section 5 of the draft ATMP is this long-term network. The long-term network is intended to describe the corridors and facilities that, once complete, will provide for a safe, continuous, and connected active transportation experience. That map is on the right-hand side of the screen here. You'll notice that it represents quite a significant linear length of active transportation facilities, much of which does not exist today. And so the goal really with this plan is that as action is taken and as investment is made in active transportation infrastructure, it's done in a means and locations that are consistent with where we see a longer-term build-out of that network occurred. It's really meant to guide investment and make sure we're coordinated toward a kind of envisioned outcome. And then within that, the plan goes from Section 5, which presents this long-term sort of ultimate build-out network, toward a series of prioritization, both actions and infrastructure. And so generally speaking, implementation is focused in 3 areas. There's a series of 17 actions that are meant to both support the advancement of infrastructure investment, but also provide those supporting policy, program, and regulatory changes to make sure we maximize the value and benefit in the build-out of the network over time. Part 2 is an identification of a series of priority projects. I'll speak to these in just a second here, but these are meant to be those portions of the long-term network that were identified as being most important for the initial advancement of investment in infrastructure. And then lastly, a series of supporting spot improvements. And so these are meant to be lower cost supporting facilities that may be pursued within existing capital or future capital funding made available. So I touched on these priority improvements just on the previous slide. We work through a process of sort of technical review as well as engaging with the community to start to understand what that sort of shorter list of priorities might be, and ultimately trying to get toward a top priority that would be the investment of near-term grant funding application. So the 6 priority network improvements that were brought forward in the draft plan and engaged with the community on through survey and open house are on the screen in front of us. It's the map on the right and a list on the left, and the draft plan itself actually describes these in a bit more detail. So the 6 candidate priority network improvements, working, I suppose, from top to bottom. 1A is a connection between Q Cove Ferry Terminal and the pre-existing pathway along Harper Road. 1B is a east-west connection along Harriet Bay Road, the section in front of the elementary school, east connecting to Arbutus Road and the Arbutus Road pathway. It's about 1 kilometer long. In that vicinity, 3A is the portion of Green Road extending south from Q Cove down toward the Cape Mudge community, with potential for connection into envisioned active transportation facilities within the Wee Kai lands as well. And then also in the vicinity of Harriet Bay. So 3 different corridor connections identified as potential priorities in that community as well. So the portion of Harriet Bay Road extending due south from the Harriet Bay Ferry Terminal down to Bucher Road. 2B is the portion of Harriet Bay Road just south of that, leading to Rebecca Spit Road. And then 2C is the portion of Rebecca Spit Road extending between Harriet Bay Road and into the park. So these were the 6 candidate priority network improvements identified in the plan and taken out to the community for consultation. And so just the consultation recently, I think I touched on this already, but we did a survey through the month of January. We also held an open house last week. I think that really the goal with these was to gauge overall level of support for the draft plan, as well as to get feedback on some of those candidate priority projects. And so key pieces of feedback from this recent engagement, and there was more than just this, but the items we really wanted to highlight for the group relevant to some of the direction we want to, I think, receive here. We asked a question in the survey: how would you rate your overall level of support for the draft active transportation network plan? The pie graph on the left-hand side of our screen is a summary of results. We saw that 50% of respondents indicated either a very high or high level of support for the draft plan. Approximately 1/3 indicated a moderate level of support. And then we had under 20% indicating low or very low. And so this suggests to us that, generally speaking, there's a good level of support for the draft plan, and something that, with exceptions, but community members do see as being a good roadmap moving forward for AT investment. We also, as I mentioned, took these 6 candidate priority projects to the community, and we asked very specifically for community members to indicate which of those 6 should be of highest priority. And we received very strong feedback on 2 of these priority projects as being most important to the community. So those were the section of Harriet Bay Road immediately south of Harriet Bay Ferry Terminal, and the connection between Kwathiaski Cove Ferry Terminal and the pre-existing Harper Road pathway. These were very clearly the 2 that received the highest level of support. So concluding and next steps, we do want to confirm 1 priority project that will be the subject of an application to the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program. We are suggesting that the Kwathiaski Cove Ferry Terminal connection would make the ideal priority project and a good candidate for application to the grant program. It obviously provides a nice connection between the ferry terminal, the village, and the pathway. But in terms of success for grant application, we do feel that the linear length and the anticipated cost of this facility would match very well with the criteria for the grant. We think also that the nature of the facility being one that connects children to the elementary school, connects middle and secondary school children and commuters to and from Campbell River, it does, via the ferry, does provide very good linkage with the emphasis of the BCAT grant, which really is a focus on meeting daily travel needs. And then lastly, through conversation with Weeway Nation, there's also a level of support there that their indication of support as this being a priority for their community as well would go a long way toward presenting a strong application. So we are suggesting that this QCO ferry connection is priority number one, but also looking to receive feedback and confirm that. We do want to finalize the active transportation network plan. A finalized plan not only guides your community in future, it is a requirement of grant funding that we have an endorsed plan in place that indicates that future projects that are being applied for are part of that plan. Another step will be, once we've confirmed our priority project, is to prepare a conceptual design and cost estimate for that project number one. And that will be the kind of the key piece that then is embedded in the application in the fall to the BC Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant Program. So this is sort of our next steps in the coming months. From there, our hope is that the Active Transportation Network Plan is a great reference plan and document for your community, and it'll help guide and help this community realize greater investment improvements in the active transportation network. So I'll conclude with that, and I'm very happy to remain on the line for any question and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments, particularly on Section 6.3. With regards to advocating for school crosswalk improvements, I'm having the same challenge in Area D, and what I've discovered is that when we deal with the Ministry of Transportation, they don't seem to be too keen on making changes to these crosswalks. We have quite the issue in Area D where we have the one school. They're reluctant to do anything like speed bumps. They're reluctant to put in signs. We also are very strong advocates for active transportation in Area D. Most of our roads are extremely narrow. That makes that a very challenging thing. We also have a lot of speeding. And again, after 2 years of talking to the Ministry of Transportation, we can't get signage. We certainly can't get signs that are what you call speed reader signs. What I actually found last year is that for the speed reader signs, what we have to do is get a partner, and the partner would have to be somebody like ICBC. Then we have to go through a permitting process and obtain permits, and then those signs can only stay out there for a short period of time, and then they need to be removed. So what I'm finding, make this short, is that the Ministry of Transportation is very challenging to deal with, and I don't know how we can properly advocate. Thank you.
Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. And I would entirely agree with your assessment there, Director Rice, because honestly, when I read this report and the fact that that was the number one spot improvement recommendation is to advocate for installing crosswalks and updating the crosswalks. And I was thinking to myself, well, like, I've already been doing that for multiple times for 2 years. But then I saw the little price tag on the side, like $5,000 to $10,000. And I thought, oh, maybe I've been doing it wrong. I haven't been like offering the money. Is that what we have to do, is like say, hey, Ministry of Transportation, our active transportation network plan says we need to do this and we would like to help fund it? Is that how we get action? I would make, does anybody, staff, have a weighing in on that? I mean, that's what the report identifies.
Through the chair. I suppose in some ways it's a bit of a rhetorical question because obviously we can't represent Mott on this matter. Yes, there is always an element of partnership that sweetens the deal, I suppose. But yes, putting that kind of priority into an endorsed plan does have more weight than when we just ask the ministry to do something. It gives us more weight with the elected officials at the ministry as well. So that's why we include it here, even though it's something that is outside of our jurisdiction. Including some funding support on that, again, makes it more more viable for the ministry to act. There is support in our conversations. Of course, our consultation included conversation with the ministry. And it's not that they don't support these actions, but sometimes us taking the lead on implementing it with their consent is how that it actually gets done. So to be seen in this particular case, but that is what we have seen in the past.
I appreciate that. So in fact, yes, the price tag and us recommending or suggesting that we can financially support fixing a crosswalk might actually have a benefit. Wow, okay, that's awesome to know. I did have a couple of questions and comments, if I may, about the report. And I just wanted to say that I'm really impressed with the number of people that weighed in, 151 plus 35. I think that's more than 10% of the adult population in Area C by my calculation, so that was pretty great. And on page 14 of the PDF, or page 8 of the report, it lists destinations for active transportation, and one of these headings is recreation. And I just wanted to flag that I think that the key recreation opportunities which are listed is missing Quadra Island's extensive trail network, and I'd like to see that added to that section prior to finalization. And on page 25 of the report, there's a section on trails as active transportation trail networks, and there's a list of important community trail linkages, and I would recommend or suggest that that list also include the newly completed Arbutus Trail, which links Cedar and Smiths Road neighborhoods with Cape Mudge Road, which really creates a linkage which allows quicker access to the cove for all of the folks that are living in those neighborhoods. I'd love to see that added. I was a little taken aback by the terminology in the section which talks about informal trails, which may or may not include necessary permitting. I just wanted to mention that the Quadra Island Trails Committee collaborates annually and more often than that with the Provincial Rec Sites and Trails Division of the Ministry of Forests to ensure they are working within the parameters of the provincial agency. I understand that not all trails are sanctioned, but it might be, I was wondering if it was possible to maybe update that language to say that, to be more inclusive of the good work that there are volunteers doing.
I'm happy to include the work that they do. The reason that language is what it is referring less to Crown lands and more to private lands. There are a lot of unofficial trails that cross woodlots, for instance, that may or may not have the consent of the property owner. And as an endorsed plan, we have to be very careful about inviting trespass.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that. Okay. So the report is recommending that the number one priority is the Q Cove Road, and that would connect with the path that we already have. And I'm not questioning that priority because I know that it is important, and I can also really see that the other priority, which was identified, is very important to a lot of people. And it sounds like the funding envelope that is available through that we can apply for would more likely suit the shorter, I think the term was linear length of the Q Cove Trail. Are there opportunities, or could there be opportunities in the future to find support for longer linear lengths?
Yes. That's an easy answer, but ultimately it's important to remember that as part of this particular project, we are identifying one priority that we are bringing to a state of shovel readiness specifically for that active transportation infrastructure grant. But clearly the Harriet Bay terminal is also a key destination. So that would also be something that we would be looking for funding for, just not in September through this particular intake. But there are other grant opportunities. There are other ways that we could fund that segment because it is, again, clearly a priority as well.
Okay, I'm really relieved to hear that because I just know how important that area is, really connecting the commercial Harriet Bay core and the hotels and dining and with the provincial park and a campground, right? So, and that's a very narrow and very busy section of road, especially in the summer. So I'm really happy to hear that that's not gonna shift too far off the radar. And I'm really happy that we have done this plan, and I'm really grateful to staff for getting it done in the short time frame that I know that the funding envelope allowed. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Manish.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Director Mwini. You did recommend just a couple of changes in there. Did you want to see those changes happen before we pass this on to the board? Or any recommendations from staff on how to incorporate those?
Those are very minor changes that I'm sure we can incorporate before the board sees it. Thank you.
Great.
On receipt then, all those in favor? Thank you. And the motions, Director Mwini.
I will move that the committee recommend that the Electoral Area C Active Transportation Network Plan be forwarded to the board for approval.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Oh, you
Can I
wanna
ask
speak
one
to it?
question first? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will the report, when it's going to the board, will it identify the number one priority? And is that like part of the process? Like, will we be having a separate application process and seeing that for the grant or part two, or how does that work?
Yes, so I suppose as it goes forward to the board, this Dan Casey will be giving the same presentation and making the same recommendation. What we are doing following the endorsement of the report is, again, bringing that one project to that state of shovel readiness. And so really, we don't, that enables us to have the surety that we will proceed with the work necessary to do that. But it will come back to the board in September before it's submitted for the Active Transportation Infrastructure Grant, because that would also require board endorsement.
Chair, if I may ask one more question?
Yep.
Thank you. I feel like for this particular piece that is being identified as the number one priority, I guess I'm wondering about it seems like it's going to need to be really collaborative. And by that, I mean, obviously we have a consultant involved, but also so we have SRD staff and we have Ministry of Transportation, and the consultant mentioned we have a Kai Nation, but I also think that BC Ferries needs to be at that table because has a lot to do with them and their traffic.
Yes, and happy to report that they have already been part of our consultation process.
Okay, and you'll continue to work with them on
Of course,
the
yeah.
planning? Thank you.
Calling the question on the motion. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That's carried. Number 7, financial assistance, Electoral Area D for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Director Mwini. Anything here?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. Before I go through these items, I do want to just make this known to the public that with all of the interesting issues over grants, I've seriously taken a look at the grants in Area D, and we've been slowly reducing the tax requisition in Area D on these grants. So going forward, Area D's grants are going to be quite limited. We're going to limit it to $10,000 a year max. There will only be 4 grants per year given out. They will be $2,500 apiece, and that's it. And that's all we're going to do. So anyways, I just want to put that out to the public and let them know that that is a change that'll be made with our grants. Thank you.
On receipt then, all those in favor? That is unanimous. That's carried. And Director Rice, motion, please.
I'd like to move item B, that the committee recommend that the board approve grants and aid to be paid from the Electoral Area D grant and aids budget as follows. $2,000 to Campbell River Citizens on Patrol to assist with the 2025 operational expenses. $5,000 to the Campbell River Seawolves Football Club to assist with costs associated with the startup of a new football program, and $3,000 to the Strathcona Wilderness Institute to assist with core operations.
Second.
Thank you. Anything here? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Carried. Bylaws, number 598, Cortez Island zoning for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion, staff, anything?
Thank you to the committee through the chair. Today we're presenting you with the proposed bylaw number 598, Cortez Island zoning bylaw for your consideration. This bylaw is being introduced to consider the replacement of the existing Cortez Island zoning bylaw number 2455, 2002. This bylaw comes in response to changing legal requirements as well as community feedback received through the consultation process as described in the report. Some of the key attributes of this bylaw are the result of an attempt to improve the clarity of the regulations and also balance the need for more housing in the community with the environmental concerns of many residents. And this was done through targeting new permitted dwellings to areas that are already developed in the form of secondary suites and additional dwelling units, as well as allowing property owners to maintain their level of regulation or in some cases improve their flexibility and support the objectives outlined in the Cortez OCP. Thank you.
Thank you, directors. Mr. Vanash.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff. This has been over a year of consultation with the community. Really appreciate staff's ongoing work in that consultation, the online meetings that happened, the in-person meetings, multiple chances for people to get involved and provide their input, as well as just plainly sending an email, making it really easy for people to consult. I think this bylaw represents the will of the community to allow for more housing, make it easier for more family housing, to look at increase the size of secondary dwellings to more of a small family sized rather than just sort of recreational cottage. And I also really appreciate the allowance for the nonprofit zoning on as the Cortez Housing Society provides affordable housing on the island. I don't want to go to the board yet with this bylaw. One of the things that has come up in the community is a desire to look at as a maximum house size, which has been done in other jurisdictions across the province, both a minimum house size and a maximum house size, apparently, depending on the jurisdiction. But that's something I do want to explore. I think there is support for the community. What that number is exactly, I'm not sure, and I'd like to go through a consultation process. So I have a slightly amended motion than what we're looking at here for C. And I'm going to skip B for now and have that consultation come back and then have the bylaw come back to the board. Just the one other thing I would add is, or just hearing from the community, is that even for myself looking at this, it's like, okay, what are the changes here? What are we actually specific changes? And I think it would be really useful to include the old bylaw in the report when it comes back the next time, just so that people can be like, oh yeah, okay, I can see what's happening here. I know it is accessible if you search on the website, but just making it really easy in the staff report. Yeah, just really grateful for staff's hard work on it and coming over for extra meetings, especially Annie on that last one, and really excited to move this forward eventually. Thank you.
On receipt, all those in favor, Director Whitty? Go ahead, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It sounds like it's been a really great, engaged project on Cortez, but, I'm not from that community, so I was trying to read this draft bylaw and compare it with the previous draft bylaw just to get my own understanding. And I noticed a couple things that have changed, and I just had a couple of quick questions, wondering if this was intentional. One of them, I noticed that the current zoning bylaw has a comment that says that a second dwelling or cottage where permitted by the bylaw does not carry with it the privileges of separate ownership, or permission for a second dwelling is not to be construed in any way as a justification for a change in land use designation. And we have a similar phraseology in our Quadra Island zoning bylaw. However, I didn't find that in the draft bylaw, and I was curious if there was a reason that it had been excluded.
Thank you. Through the chair, it's been determined that it's actually unnecessary language and doesn't hold any real weight. The bylaw itself speaks to the requirements for subdivision and minimum lot sizes, and there are other mechanisms to have different levels of ownership or different forms of ownership, and so we don't want to confuse the situation and with the public by indicating that perhaps there isn't another mechanism for dual ownership over lands, given the different types of ownership types that there could be. So it's not necessarily in the bylaw, and it doesn't change anything with respect to how density is provided or how subdivision would be applied through the region. So we've removed it.
Okay, and thank you for explaining your reasoning on that one. And then I also noticed that in the proposed zoning bylaw, there's, under home occupations, there's been added a requirement that home applications have to be approved by the regional district. And I didn't find a similar requirement in the current Cortez zoning bylaw. So I was curious what the reasoning for adding this requirement for application with the SRD was. Does it originate in community requests for more home-based business oversight, or was there another reason?
Thank you, through the chair. Home occupations have always required approval on Cortez, as required through our planning procedures bylaw. This just makes it more known to those applicants that are, or those proponents that are operating home occupations, that it does require a one-time approval. So we've added it to the zoning bylaw just as an added information piece, basically, but it doesn't change anything. Home occupations have always required approval in both Quadra and Area D and Cortez.
Okay, thank you.
Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. Just another question around the primary residence requirement for Airbnbs. It seems that, reading this bylaw, that is sort of baked into this updated bylaw, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to that and also speak to making it maybe more obvious.
Thank you, through the chair. So short-term rentals are identified under section 9.1, uses permitted in all zones. And it states short-term rentals accessory to residential use. And then residential use, if I can find the definition. Residential use is defined as the permanent occupancy and use of a dwelling.
Which would, if I'm correct, would imply that you either have a full-time renter or the owner occupying it as their primary residence.
That's correct.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I'm wondering, can we make it more clear? Can we use the words primary residence? Is there a way to make it more clear for folks? Or is this enough?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. I think because of the way that the new legislation has been worded, principal residence could mean multiple things. So we actually just sat in on a session yesterday with respect to short-term rentals and how the principal residence requirement is going to be applied. And there's a number of scenarios as to whether or not that principal residence requirement is met. The zoning bylaw can't regulate the user, so that's one of the problems here, is that we regulate the use, not the user, which is why we're trying to apply the language as closely as we can to the provincial legislation to ensure that if there isn't a permanent residential component, then that short-term rental would not be considered residential in nature and would be therefore commercial and then not permitted. So there's kind of two layers here, whether or not they meet the principal requirement or not. Firstly, whether or not they meet the zoning bylaw to be able to be considered as residential as opposed to commercial. And then secondly, whether or not they meet that requirement for principal residence. The added layer here is whether or not the principal residence requirement will continue on a yearly basis. And so as you are opting in yearly, and as sometimes happens that electoral area directors change and perhaps that vision changes with those electoral area directors that are then in the seat, this allows us not to have to go in on a annual or quarterly or every 4 years to have to potentially change that bylaw. So we can't regulate the user. We know that there's the option to have hosts and co-hosts where the co-host is actually the owner of the property, and there is a principal residence in place, but that's the tenant. So we cannot define that very easily within the zoning bylaw. So this is our best effort to do that, while still ensuring that firstly, there's a residential use, and secondly, that there's a principal residential use.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Nothing further? On receipt, all those in favor? Got a motion? Director Benesh?
Yes, I do, thank you.
That's carried, by the way.
Yeah, it was. I'll move that staff prepare a public survey in consultation with Area B Director to determine the maximum building size for primary dwelling units prior to public hearing being scheduled, and that be brought back to EASC.
Second.
If I may add a friendly.
Did we have a secondary there?
Can I just because the bylaw doesn't define primary dwelling unit, I think if you were just to leave it open as to dwelling unit, any dwelling unit, regardless of whether or not in the bylaw we have, dwelling unit principal or dwelling unit accessory, doesn't really matter here if you're looking to have a maximum dwelling unit size, so I would remove primary from your recommendation.
Okay. And just sort of a slight change there to include a maximum building size rather than area. I've done a bunch of research. It seems like that is common in other areas. Rather than say a footprint, we can actually do a building size. I think that's easier for people to imagine when they're being consulted on that. And I do appreciate the removal of the word primary.
Again, if I may, through the chair, I would recommend building area. That's how it's defined and is most closely aligned with BC Building Code to determine the actual size of a building. So we define it as building area, again, which is in alignment with provincial legislation.
Okay, I guess, I just, like, for example, North Vancouver, they use building size. Squamish, they use building size.
Thank you, through the chair. For all intents and purposes, that would meet the same definition as building area, but building area, like I said, we've amended all of the definitions to be in alignment with those provincial definitions. So building area is not building footprint. It is most closely related to building size, but building area is the formal definition.
Okay, so when folks are consulted, they'll be like, okay, 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet, 3,500 square feet. That'll imply the size of the building. And I wonder if we can make that clear. Oh, we're going to consult because, we'll be in consultation. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, I think in regards to this comment, I think there's going to be folks that are going to be like, don't tell me what to do on my land. And, I'll build a house as large as I want. I get that argument. And what I'm hearing from my community is that, the hope of implementing this is that it sort of closes the door somewhat to Cortez being a place for, the sort of the rich and famous to build their summer mansions. And it just doesn't make sense from, impacting housing prices across the island and also from an environmental perspective. So I'm really curious to see what the community comes back with on this one. Thank you.
Anything further?
Oh, yeah, we went to building area, yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, prior to a public hearing being scheduled. Can we just say and be brought back to EASC? Yeah. Because it's already implied that. So I'm taking out prior to a public hearing. Yeah. And then we'll use that consultation to make an amendment in the bylaw.
We good?
If staff are happy with that, then yeah, okay, great, thanks.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that's carried.
Yeah.
New business. Director Mooney has new business. Just before you start, Director Mooney, I had one item of new business I might just mention, just a question to staff. Priority. Is it possible in our next budget iteration to put in a line that would indicate the amount that is set up for electoral area planning staff, the dollar amount used for regional reports and services and so on. I think Aneco every year gives a number to our accountant. We never know what the number is. It'd be a nice number to know.
How much time planning staff
Just a dollar amount.
dedicate to regional issues?
Yeah. It's a dollar amount you give, right?
I don't ever recall that. It's going to be pretty small.
Is it?
Yeah.
I thought, Mike, you had a number there.
I have the total amount. What percentage that gets allocated to specific services, I don't know.
Well, it doesn't have to be specific, just a total amount of what part of planning staff that electoral areas pay for is allocated to regional.
Very little.
Yeah, we don't allocate out any of the planning staff's salaries directly to any regional service, so I don't know the amount. But if I had an estimate, it would change every year, obviously. But like I say, I have the total. So if 85 or 90% of their time is on electoral area,
More than that. The only, I would say, person involved in that would be a small amount of Aneco. Like out of the planning staff, I can't think of anything that they work on regional.
So it's not a budgeted thing, you're saying?
No, because they don't allocate any of their time other than like a non-material amount from Aneco.
Okay, I thought the odd report was done by planning staff.
I'll never say never, but it's going to be, I'm going to say non-material.
We'll leave it there for now. All right, Robin.
Thank you, Chair. My item was the Area C OCP, and my question is I was hoping that staff could provide a verbal update to the directors here on the upcoming plans and next steps that we would expect to see happening for the Area C OCP plans.
Thank you, through the chair. To the director. So we have currently moved from basically what we were calling phase one project initiation for the OCP, which was our initial community outreach, review of existing plans and some gap analysis, looking at the most recent demographics for the area. And then, of course, reviewing those new legislative requirements as they relate to a new official community plan. We've moved into phase two by doing some of the initial consultation with the communities. So far, we've only hit a small portion of the outer islands, Discovery Islands, mainland inlets, and Quadja Island itself. We are currently engaging with our First Nations and key interest groups as part of phase two. And we're continuing to refine our consultation plan based on that work that's being done. We are using what we are gathering from these consultation sessions and these conversations to start making notes on draft content and comparing the existing OCP language to what we're hearing now. We'll then take this information and learnings and do further consultation as part of phase two. As noted in your updates and on the website currently, there is information there that's showing our phases and what's coming next. So I encourage you to look to that. We're looking to engage other portions of the community, specifically when it comes to school-age children and young families. So that's being worked on as we speak, prior to us then determining when we go back to the community and in what form. So that's where we are, but certainly we have updates on the website that you're more than welcome to look and encouraged to look, and the community as well.
Go ahead.
If I may have a follow-up there, Chair? Thank you, and I have been paying attention to the website, and I do get asked by community members wondering when there will be another chance to provide input. There's questions about if there's going to be specific breakout topic meetings, and of that sort of thing that I'm being asked for, and I'm happy that you're going to be talking to students and young families. I'll also flag that that is probably the smallest percentage of the community, and that Active Transportation Network Plan really identified that the number of senior citizens is the growth area for the population in Area C. So hopefully those folks are also going to have some consultation. And when you're mentioning that you're meeting with key interest groups, could you identify at all like the list of who those groups are and the nature of those conversations?
I would say forming the list is kind of the stage we're at. So they haven't like the meetings themselves haven't started, but we're forming a list of who we'll be reaching out to.
Thank you.
Okey-dokey, so a motion to terminate?
Motion to terminate.
Second.
Thank you, all in favor? That's carried.